Good morning. All right, so hope you guys are doing well. Give me a shout out in the chat room there to see if you can see my screen and hear me. My internet connection is always spotty at best, so you never know. I could be broadcasting to nothing right now. So if you can see this and hear me, definitely just say you can in the chat. So I hope you guys are doing well. Welcome back to another episode of AskZBrush Live here on Twitch. So I'm just going to do a quick rundown through all of this, what AskZBrush is. I've been a little bit lax in the past few weeks on getting a lot of these videos done. Hopefully this week I'll have a lot of the questions answered. So AskZBrush is a system that you can send in your questions through Twitter. So if we go to AskZBrush on Twitter here, you can ask your questions through here. And weekly, I attempt to go through and answer these in short videos that then get posted on YouTube. And we are migrated now to AskZBrush Volume 2. So the Volume 2 playlist will focus mainly on ZBrush 4R8. So we had 200 videos with ZBrush 4R7, and with the free upgrade to ZBrush 4R8, we've now made a new playlist on our YouTube site here, and that is just AskZBrush Volume 2. So all these videos will focus entirely on ZBrush 4R8. So I hope you guys good. We got some people saying yes, they can hear us in the chat. Seagull Crush, I see you're in here. You did send me a message. I just got it. I may need to message you later because I'm not quite sure what you were mentioning about the text and font stuff. So just hit me up or send me an email at joseph@pixologic.com, and I'll be happy to see if I can get that text stuff working for you. I did see the message, though. Just wanted to let you know. So did any of you guys go out and see the eclipse yesterday? Did anyone see it in totality? Anyone? I saw partial. I was gonna drive down south, but it was about a 6-hour drive to go see it in totality, and I had a bunch of work stuff I had to do, so I didn't go on that excursion. So also, if you guys are want some more information on what ZBrush has been doing, or what we have been doing, so we have our summit coming up, and our summit will be taking place on October 6th through 8th. So if you are looking for more information on ZBrush, it is a free event. So if you live in California near the LA area, it's definitely worth the trip. You can come on site and watch all the presentations of all the tremendous artists that will be demoing ZBrush and how they use it. The Sculpt Off this year will be October 5th, and that is an online-only event, so we'll be streaming it. Me and Jessica Drew will be doing our play-by-play for that, so if you want to watch that, that is October 5th, and then the summit, which is the presentations and the workshops, will be October 6th through 8th, and that is going to be streamed online. And then if you're in the LA area, you can definitely head out to the Nanomesh campus, and we will be there for the event. In addition to this, we have workshops, so we have presentations and workshops. So if you're in LA and you'd like to attend a workshop, we have a few of these, and these slots are filling up, and these will be taking place on Saturday the 7th and also Sunday. So each of these here have a bunch of different classes, and these are with various artists. So if you guys are familiar with Shane, who's also here on Twitch doing his own streaming stuff, he has a workshop that he's going to be doing. We also have Seth Thompson, who is a artist over at Blizzard, so a tremendous artist as well, and he's got a bunch of seats left in his class. So if you're in LA and you're planning on coming to the summit on site, then you can sign up for these classes as well and take these, and you'll be training in a Nanomesh classroom, and I think our seats are, 16 is what we have. So it's small group, you're one-on-one time with Seth, and he's going to go through all that stuff with that. Furio is sold out for his class. We also have Dan Ketcher, who, if you guys are familiar with Game of Thrones, can't talk this morning. He did the dragons for Game of Thrones. So if you want to see how the dragons were made for Game of Thrones, definitely check this out, because he's got a whole bunch of seats left on this, and he'll go through his entire process of modeling the dragons. So I think that's definitely something to check out if you guys are going to be around at the summit. We also have Michael Clymer, who's at Bungie, and I worked with Michael Clymer for a while doing the Ghost Recon stuff. So another tremendous artist, and he's going to go through weapon creation and props and using Zmodeler and the Boolean and all sorts of that fun stuff. And then we have Jared Krzyzewski, who's another one that's done tons of conceptual artwork for everything. So Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, all sorts of stuff. So he has seats left in his workshop as well. So if you're heading to the summit and you'd like to attend one of these workshops, these are up now on our site, and you can just click the option here to purchase these, and then you can attend those. Everything else at the summit is free, so you can attend the summit for free, but if you want to go to a workshop, this is a paid class, so you will have to pay for the workshops. But everything else on site at the ZBrush Summit is free to the public. Now, if you have any other questions related to ZBrush, since this is the AskZBrush Twitch live here, if I don't answer them or I give you an answer that you're maybe not happy with, you can definitely go to our support.pixologic.com site and submit a ticket through here. And this is primarily pretty much the best way to get a lot of answers for stuff that you may be having, or if you have licensing issues, or maybe you think you've run across a potential bug inside of ZBrush, definitely go to support.pixologic.com and submit a ticket here. We also have a knowledge base on our support site here, and this is basically an FAQ, so if you have some questions, definitely check this out, because there often will have the answers here as well. And there's a lot of Keyshot items floating around recently involving Keyshot 5, so definitely if you are one of the people that are having those issues, definitely submit a ticket to support.pixologic.com. All right, so let me check questions here. We got chat's quiet today. You guys need to start queuing up some questions here. Or you're just going to see me sculpt randomness for the next hour here. So I want to go through some of these that are on Twitter here right now. So there's some of these I just want to hit on really quick. One here from Nikki. She sent in a question: does 4R8 install over 4R7? So if you download the full installer for 4R8, it will not install over 4R7. It's going to create a new directory and install to that location. So this will allow you to have 4R8 and 4R7 installed on your machine. So definitely, if you have a concern about that happening and you have not gone and downloaded 4R8 and installed the free upgrade, you don't have to worry. It will not install over 4R7. Some other ones I want to click on here really quick. So we had this one sent in, and these are ones basically I just want to hit on quick because I will not be doing a video on these, but I do want to get them answered so I can answer them through AskZBrush Live here. So is there a way to insert edge loops following the edge flow of a tool? And the example is this low poly pipe. So the user wants to come in and through, say, this angle here, they want to insert an edge loop and have it follow the curve around the surface here. So you can attempt to do this with insert multi-edge loops and the elevation option, but you're going to have to guess pretty much the height in which they'll be applied. There's no functionality with the Zmodeler brush currently that will allow you to come through and add an edge loop and have it look at the curvature around here and generate that loop around that bend there. So the answer to that is there is not currently a way to do that. And then I think there was some other ones here I wanted to hit on quick. For this adaptive skin one, and so I downloaded ZBrush on my iMac, applied an adaptive skin to the design, made a Z-spheres, and when I click ZBrush, it crashes. So this is one definitely to send to support.pixologic.com, and we can assist you on that and see if it's related to the install. There's a lot of things that can happen if you have antivirus enabled on your machine, and so if you've just installed ZBrush and you have some antivirus, it sometimes can cause issues with permissions and other things in the installation, so that could be contributing to the fact of why ZBrush is crashing. So this is definitely an item for support.pixologic.com. We have one from Neil here. Can you import splines into ZBrush and convert them to fiber mesh? So the answer to this is currently no. It is something that we are potentially looking into for a future version. And we've had a few of these for, let's see if I can find this one here. relating to the Boolean system and unwrapping. So the Boolean system is not going to hold the UVs after you process it. So if you have models that have UVs on it after you process with the Boolean, the UVs will not stay. So you will have to unwrap the model after you do the make Boolean mesh. So we've had a few questions on that come through Twitch as well. And then this one here related to the ZBrush renaming the first subtool when you save the tool out. This is the default functionality for ZBrush. So one thing I recommend doing is just generating a dummy object that will sit on top of your subtool list, and then it will rename that tool and not rename the one below it. So pretty much you just make a dummy object that sits in the subtool palette, and then when you save, it's going to rename that one instead of the other tools in your scene there. So, and I'll show that too here in a second. Let me just make a note of that. We have a question on Twitch here about asking is ZBrush planning on implementing a rent-to-buy system because of the cost outright, and is it something we would be looking into? So this is something that I think we are potentially looking into. I do not have the answer for that. I know it is something that we will possibly looking into. I cannot say if it will happen or not, but it is on our radar and it is something. All right, so this one I'm going to do today, this one here, and then this week I will be making a little rug pattern here for Debbie to show her that process as well. So, all right, so let's hop into ZBrush now. Get my clicking here. I've been out of the Twitch stream for too many weeks now. It's like it's getting back into the swing of things. All right, so the first thing I want to show you is just the option of adding that second subtool for the saving. So I'm going to come into Lightbox here by pressing comma. I'm just going to load the demo soldier in here quick. And so if you'd want to save the file out and not have the, say, let's say I have his body here named body, and he has all these other ones, and say I want to save this out, but I still want this subtool here to be saved as body. So what I recommend doing is just coming down here to the subtool palette and just quickly inserting, say, a cube, and then you can take this cube and then just simply move this to the top. And now this is just a dummy object that's in your scene. So if you come through now, you can just hide this as well by clicking the eyeball icon, and you won't see this in your scene. But now if you save this, so let me just save this out quick. And when you save this, you'll notice that it's going to still rename that top subtool. But since that top subtool is no longer the body, now it's not going to rename that one. So that is one thing you can do in order to kind of combat the fact that ZBrush will rename the top subtool in your list to be the file name of your scene. Now, if you save a project file and not a tool, it's not going to rename that because it's just going to generate a project which consists of all these tools. So if I delete the demo scene here, and now I just have this subtool set as body, and now I say come up here and save out a project file. Let's save this quick as well. This is now going to save, and you'll see at the top here that my project is now renamed to Demo Soldier Project, and you'll notice that the subtool still has the same name. So if you save a project file, it will not rename the subtool on the top. But if you save a tool, it will rename the subtool on the top. So you can append a new tool, and then it'll rename that, or you can just save a project file, and then it won't rename it as well. So two options there for making sure that your subtools stay the same name, and that's often helpful for exporting out or keeping things consistent when using morphing or sending things to other applications. So one little trick there that hopefully helps. Let's see what we got for questions. So Seagull, you should be able to still extrude polys out with the transpose line here. So let's grab I could be totally wrong, but you should still be able to do this. So I just grabbed a cube. I'm going to now just convert this to a Polymesh 3D. Turn my polyframes here. I'm going to switch to the move mode here. I'm going to turn off the transpose line, and I'm just going to mask part of this here. And then with the transpose line, I'm going to hold down Shift and drag, and that'll give me normal extrude. And which one is it? Which one is it? Well, maybe you're right. I'll have to look into that. This should be working now. Add it to the list. But the extrusion should work, and it should allow you to create a different edge there to draw off of. So, because this inset works, the other one should work as well. It's the fun time. It's morning. Still waking up. Still waking up. So the mouse wheel, you can get to zoom inside of ZBrush. Let me find that for you. I have a video on this one already. I can link that in the chat here. So if you do a search, let's hop back over to Chrome here. So if you go just do a search on YouTube for how can I use the mouse wheel to zoom inside of ZBrush, and you'll get taken to this video. And this one will cover how to get that functionality to work. Basically, you just need to bind your mouse wheel to use this in and out button here that's underneath the document palette. And then when this is enabled, you'll be able to zoom in and out with your mouse inside of ZBrush. So that'll allow you to zoom in and out and then give you that functionality that you're looking for. Yeah, so the plugin, you can do it as well too. There is one in there. I see we have a comment there as well. But even the default without any plugins installed, you just need to bind your hotkeys to these two buttons, and then that'll allow you to perform that zoom in and out. So back to ZBrush. All right, so I got two things that I want to hit on here quick. So we have one here, can I assign a hotkey to the center of the pivot or go home in gizmo mode? So you can currently not assign any hotkeys to the gizmo mode. So if you have the gizmo active and you're talking, the question is asking if these options here can be assigned a hotkey. So you can instantly click one of these and then use that. Currently that is not possible, so you will not be able to assign a hotkey to the gizmo there on your mesh. So sorry about that. That is not implemented currently. There also, you can only duplicate a model when moving, so you cannot do it with rotating. So the question here is asking about, in the Gizmo 3D mode, if you have a model and it is a polymesh object and it does not have subdivisions, if you switch to the Gizmo 3D or transpose and you hover over one of the move options and then hold down Control and drag, it'll duplicate that object. This is all the same subtool still. And what this is doing, it's looking at the unmasked or masked areas of your mesh, and it's just cloning it. So this will allow you to come through and clone your mesh around, and you can see this is all doing it on that same subtool. So this is handy just for like duplicating items on your mesh. So the process for that again is just have a model with no subdivisions, and then hold down Control and use any of the move options on the Gizmo 3D, and that will duplicate that part of the mesh. Now this will not work with rotate, so the question was asking, will it work with rotate? And unfortunately it does not. So if you hold Control and click rotate, you're not going to get a duplication off of that. So if you need to perform a rotation action, the workflow that I usually end up doing is I'll duplicate the tool, then rotate, and then duplicate again and rotate. And I usually end up that process to get rotations to happen. And this is, I find, just a little bit quicker than duplicating, moving it back into position, and then performing the rotation. So duplication and then rotation is usually the way I go on that. And then to merge these things back together, you can just go to Merge and do a Merge Visible, and then that's going to give you a new tool with all those parts merged together. Now when you do the merge, most of the time it will not weld unless the points are directly on top of each other. So this just gave me an object with all these different meshes, and if you come down to say the polygroups area here and do auto groups, this is going to give me a new polygroup for each geometry island. So you can see that all those pieces are still separate, and then you can still come through with Control and Shift and isolate these guys out if needed. But that's the process I usually end up doing for taking an object and duplicating it with a rotation. So duplicating the subtool and then performing the rotate. And you can hotkey the duplication option, so you can do that, duplicate it, rotate, duplicate, rotate, duplicate, rotate, and that usually goes pretty fast. So one thing we had that was in the AskZBrush, hashtag AskZBrush, is we had some questions about exporting out the material that is currently linked up to the matte caps. So if I go to my material palette here, and I'm just going to dock this to the side over here, and if I go to the modifiers area, you'll see down at the bottom you have this image. And so a matte cap, or any of the materials inside of ZBrush that have lighting included in them already, are basically using a sphere to generate the lighting on your model. And some of these, like the matte cap gray here, has a single sphere, but then if you switch to, say, red wax, you're going to notice there is 2 spheres. So one of the questions we had was, how can I get this map out so I can use it elsewhere? So a lot of times people may want this lighting in other applications, so they want to capture this sphere. So there's a few ways you can do this. The most easiest way to do this is if you have a matte cap selected, down here there's a button called Create Matte Cap Texture. And so simply just selecting the matte cap and then clicking this is going to generate a new image of that matte cap, and then from here you can go to the texture palette and export that out and use it. Now, what you get outputted is going to pertain to what settings you have here. So this one's pretty much a null setting here, so it's giving me pretty much the pure color of this matte cap when it's generated. So these should look pretty consistent through here if you hover over these. Now, if I switch back to, say, the red wax, this one has 2, right? So it has an A and a B. And if you look at your settings here, these are determining how this effect is happening. So you just want to come through and you want to zero these out basically to make sure we get a pure A and a pure B. So we can increase this, and as you change these sliders, you're going to see that your matte cap is going to update. And so whatever you have these set to is going to determine which one you're seeing. So if we change the intensity for B to 1 and change this to 0 and then change my transition and then turn the cavity detection down, opacity, zero these out. You can see that you're going to get the spheres that should closely relate to what the ones you have on here. Now, I'm currently massacring these here. So let's get 1 and 1. Where's my one that, this is here. So by changing your cavity transition, this is going to focus on either the A sphere or the B sphere. So at 1, you can see I'm getting the sphere that represents the B sphere. And then if I change this to 0, I'm getting the sphere that represents the A sphere. So by changing this detection here, you're going to be able to just isolate each one of those spheres. Now, sometimes people also will come through and just take a sphere and divide this up. And this is also going to give you that preview of that sphere, what it would look like if it was baked out as well. So you can often render just your sphere here with that matte cap and you'll be able to capture it. So if I want the A sphere, I'd come over here and change my transition to -1, make sure intensity is 1 for A, intensity 1 is for B. You want to make sure your depth are zeroed out, and then you also want your opacity set to 100, and this should give you a pure color of that sphere. And then if I want the other one, I can switch the other cavity transition to 1, and now I'm going to get the other color of the sphere. Now you can also capture these with 2.5D. So if I get out of edit mode, it's going to put ZBrush into 2.5D. And then I come over here and I can select, say, the, where are you at here? Wait for it. The MRGBZ grabber. There we go. And what this is going to do, it's going to grab the 2.5D data from your scene. So if I drag this out, and this does not have to engulf close to your model, because basically ZBrush is going to look at the depth, and everything that's not the sphere right now has a depth of 0, so it's going to occlude that out, and it's going to frame this correctly to that sphere. So if I draw my shape a little bit angular, and I release, you see I'm going to get this as my result. So that is going to capture one version of that sphere. Now, if you do this again, and then while you're holding Control first, it's going to capture a second one and then give you a 2-sphere result that's going to look like this. So I'm going to change my cavity transition to 1. Now I'm going to hold Control and drag this out again, and then release. Oop, that should have worked. And now I should have 2 spheres. So you can capture 2 spheres like this as well. But a lot of this is, it's more just things you can do. The best way still would just be to come here and click this Create Matte Cap Texture, and this is going to give you the version of that you have on your scene there, and then depending on what you have this transition set to, and if my detection is correct, you can keep generating out your maps like so. So I'm not sure. I did a horrible job explaining that this morning. I will be doing a video this week on this that will be a little more eloquent and hopefully won't be as confusing. Tutorials for the 2.5D brushes, they're kind of far and few now. There are a few that will live in the documents that are inside your ZBrushCore 8 install. So if you navigate to, let me see if I can pull this up here quick and just find this for you guys. Got to dig through some directories here. And then make sure you guys can see this. So if you navigate to your Pixologic ZBrushCore 8 documentation folder, in here is all the documentation and starting guides for ZBrush down to 3.5. So this will have pretty much everything from 3.5 to 4.8. So if you're looking for 2.5D stuff, for information on how to use them and things like that, I'd highly recommend checking out, say, the 3.5 tutorials. There'll be a lot of stuff in here on those. And surprisingly, the 3.5 one has stuff done by me. So there's a lot of things in here, and most of the stuff involving 2.5D are going to be found in these older kind of versions of ZBrush here. So since ZBrush started out as a 2.5D application, the older stuff was using more of that, and then it's migrated to more of a pure 3D application, so the 2.5D system really isn't used that much anymore. But there are quite a few 2.5D brushes. So if you go through here, you can see all these ones down at the bottom here are all 2.5D. Now, a lot of these are for just sculpting, so pretty much this entire top set here is all sculpting stuff, including the deco brush. Then the cloner brush will allow you to clone stuff around on your scene in 2.5D. You have blurs and sharpens and highlighters and glows. So a lot of these are self-explanatory. The multi-markers will use the marker system, and then the matte cap one will allow you to create matte caps. So the ones that are still often used are the matte cap ones. Eric Keller has a few tutorials that are very good on creating matte caps using this option here, and also using the HDR setup with environment lighting as well. So if you're looking for information on creating materials, I highly recommend you check out his stuff. So that's Eric Keller, and he's a teacher over at Nanomesh as well. For the multi-markers, this is just going to allow you to create things from markers. And so the one that I often show for this, because I've never really found a usage for this, but if you take a ring, and I just draw this out, and this is just a simple ring primitive. And so what I'm going to do with this, I'm just going to position it on my screen like this. Let me change my matte cap here. And now I'm going to go to the marker panel up here, and I'm just going to store marker. So basically this is just storing the position of this object on the canvas. And when you click this, it's going to store a little dot. So if I go to preferences and go to, let me find this here. Markers, 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 you're here somewhere. There we go. We can up my radius. And now with this, I've just positioned it on my canvas, stored a marker. I'm now going to hit Shift S, which is going to snapshot that. So now I can move it. I'm going to rotate it, position it back like the show. So go to marker, store another marker. Shift S, duplicate it, rotate it. Marker, store marker, Shift S, rotate, position it. Marker, store marker, Shift S, rotate, position it. Marker, store marker, and we'll do one more. So Shift S, position it, and marker. So now basically I've just taken this object, I've snapshotted it, which is just creating clones of it in 2.5D, and then I've stored a marker for every single one I've done. So now after I have this done, I can get out of edit mode and hit Control N, and you'll see I have all these markers on my canvas. So these markers, if you're doing turntables or things like that, you can put them on your scene, and then you can take any model, and if you just simply click on these markers, it's going to draw the mesh out exactly how it was when you stored the marker. So you can see if I can come through and click on this, I'm going to get that chain back in that 2.5D format. But in addition to just using these in that format, if you use this multi-marker system, by coming down here and clicking multi-markers, what it's going to do, it's going to draw one object out with all these parts together. So if I click on this and drag, you'll see I'm going to get this. So I'm getting the entire chain off of one marker. And then now I can go into edit mode, and you'll see I'm going to have this chain effect on my mesh. So that's the only thing I've ever really used the multi-markers for, and this is about it. So you can create chains really quick, but it is if you find a workflow that does this really well or uses this really well, I'd be really excited to hear it. It's one of these kind of, I used to call them ZBrush party tricks. So it's the things that ZBrush has that, you know, maybe really, really obscure, but you can do. And people are always like, what did you just do? And it's like, oh, it's just multi-markers. And they're like, what are you talking about? And then you can convert it to a poly mesh as well, and then you can get just a tool generated from it, and there's all those rings. So interesting way to use markers in 2.5D to generate geometry inside of ZBrush. So one question here in chat about educational ZBrush 4.8. So yes, I believe the educational stuff is available for ZBrush 4.8. You will have to go through support for that, but I know the floating licenses and those options are available for 4.8. So be through, if you're using for educational stuff, it's usually through resellers, a lot of that is. So definitely contact support.pixologic.com and they'll be able to point you in the right direction on how to obtain a educational license of ZBrush. I unfortunately do not know that information, so I'd just be telling you the wrong thing. So I have another one here I want to hit on quick, and this is involving arrays. So let's just clear my canvas here, and we're just going to go through and delete all these markers as well, because they're all over the place. There we go. And close this side panel here. With the addition of P2, so I did forget to mention this, so ZBrush is now currently 4.8 P2, so we have released a second patch for 4.8. This fixed a bunch of different items that you guys submitted through support as users, so we did solve a bunch of those, and this is a free upgrade as well. To upgrade to this, you just need to run the updater inside of your ZBrush directory, and that should download the latest version and install it. You can also go to our forums, so let's go back here to, wait for it, ZBrushCentral.com, and in here you can select this icon here that says P2 is now available. And in here, if you scroll down here, it tells you about patch 2. So these are all the things that were updated inside of patch 2. And then to download or upgrade, you have instructions here down at the bottom. So if you've not installed patch 2, you can go ahead and do that as well. So here's the things, and they have the Z upgrader you can download through here, through Windows and OS X, and that will install patch 2. A lot of the items that were resolved on here were, pretty much submitted by you guys, the community. So one thing that did get added to this was we had a lot of tickets and a lot of requests for accidentally clicking on the dividers here. So a lot of people were coming through and sculpting inside of ZBrush. They go to the subtool palette, and then they'd accidentally click on this, and this divider would just close on them. So they constantly had to go over and open it back up. So we've added the functionality of, instead of a single click requiring you to close this divider, you now need to double click this now. So if you single click it by accident, it's not going to collapse that. But now if you double click it, it will now collapse. So hopefully that will alleviate some of the issues people were having with accidentally closing this divider all the time when trying to manipulate subtools. So that's one item there. Also, the other one that has been a big one in relation to tickets and stuff in support is this dynamic brush size slider here. And I hit on last time what dynamic brush size is doing. If you guys want to see that again, I'm happy to show it to you. I'll be doing a video on that this week as well. So that will be set in stone on YouTube on just what actually dynamic does. For the majority of the time inside of ZBrush, I never have it off, but there are a few people that definitely want this off on different brushes. So now to disable this, just need to double click, and this will turn that off. And this will also now be saved with the brush. So let's say you are sculpting and you have a sphere. Let me grab this sphere here. Oh, just open a new project. So say you always sculpt with the standard brush and you never want this dynamic on. So now, instead of having it on all the time, you can now just turn it off, and now you can resave the brush. So just going to brush and doing a save as and saving over the existing brush. And now that dynamic option is never going to be on when you choose the standard brush. So you do have the ability now to save the state of the dynamic mode with the brush. So if you like clay buildup without dynamic and you like clay tubes with dynamic, you can go through and now save those brushes, and after you save them, that dynamic option is going to be respected. So now this will save with the brush. So that will allow, hopefully alleviate some of those options or things that people are running into where I just want dynamic off, always off. So now you can save it with the brush and then it will never turn back on. So hopefully that helps too. Oh, look at this. See, here we go. Let's try that again. The week after next, I'm going to be so much better at this. I took a break too long. Took too long of a break from Twitch here. I can't remember which buttons to click, so I apologize for that. Okay, so we were talking about first the dividers here. So dividers are now a double click to close these because we're having a lot of people with accidentally clicking on the divider here and closing this when they were trying to select their subtools. So come over here and click on it and it collapsed the frame here. So P2 has added the functionality of now you need to double click on this to collapse that. So hopefully that will alleviate that issues that people were having. And then the other option is the dynamic brush size. So I'm just going through these quick since you've already heard me talk about this once, but you didn't see anything. So the dynamic option here now is a double click to toggle this on and off, and this will save out per brush. So if you always want it off for the standard brush, just turn it off, and then you go to the brush palette and save this. And this will save that out, and now that will never be on when you switch to the standard brush. So you can disable the dynamic totally and then save the brush, and it will never turn back on. So if you're one of the people that want it off all the time, you can now have that option. All right, so let's see. I think we're good now. I love ZBrush under the browser. Let's see here. Is there a way to set a certain brush size for specific brushes? Something like ZapLink, but it's only brush size only. Currently, when you use the shift brush, the draw size will stay. If you switch to another brush, it's going to keep it the same. And this is just more for consistency. You could probably set a macro to generate an option for this. So if you change your draw size and then switch to another brush, the draw size will remember. I'll see if I can get something together to do that. There's no current functionality inside of ZBrush that will allow you to do that, but it is a possibility potentially through ZScripting, where it would just check for brush sizes. I'll see what I can come up with. Seagull Crush. We'll see what we can do. There may be something there. So another question we had from the hashtag AskZBrush was asking about the array mesh pivot and how we can get this to reset so that it's in the center of the world rather along the object. So this is another one that's one of those little kind of tricky little things inside of ZBrush. So first I have my sphere here. I'm just going to make sure this is a poly mesh, and I'm just going to clip half of this. So I'm going to hold Control and Shift, go to my select rectangle option here, choose the clip curve brush. I'm just going to turn this into a hemisphere here quick. Now the clip brush will not change the geometry. It's just smashing the geometry to the clip line. So you can see the sphere still has the same geometry. It's just been smashed. So it's taken that part below the clip line and just smashed it up. And now I have this half hemisphere type object. Then I'm going to go to the draw palette over here. I'm going to change my elevation to 0. So when you have a model inside of ZBrush, it's always going to attempt to take the floor grid and place it on the lowest part of the mesh. And if your model is moved, so if I move this up and then now rotate, you're going to see the floor grid is always going to attempt to snap to the base of that model. Now this makes the floor grid not always be on 0, 0, 0, right? So the floor grid is always going to be the base of your model, but it may not be at the center of the world. So you can see the center of the world axis is down here, and my floor grid is now floating above it. So if I go to the draw palette over here, there is an elevation slider that you can change, and if you change the elevation from -1 to 0, now the floor grid is always going to be at the center of the world. So it's no longer going to follow the model. So if I move the model around, you can see the floor grid is no longer going to snap to the bottom of it. So let's say I have a sphere and I have it up here like so. And what I want to do is I want to use the array mesh and I want to array it in a circle around the center of the world. So I want to come through and have this repeat all the way around like so, giving me a ring based on this hemisphere. So I'm going to go to the tool palette. I'm going to go to the array mesh tab here, open this up, and I'm just going to activate array. Now by default, with just the array option active, I can now come down, say, to the rotate area here, and I can change my Z amount to, say, 360. And you'll notice that it is currently going to apply this array based on the local axis of this object. So it's looking at basically the bounding box of the object, and it's going to find the center of that, and that's where the array is being generated. So if I come up here and click repeat, you can see that it's going to rotate in 360 degrees in that Z axis, but it's rotating it around the local axis of that object. So I don't want it happening to the local axis, I want it happening to the world. So you could attempt to come through and select the pivot option here and start changing these options, so changing the Y, and you can modify this so that it would start giving you that ring, but at this stage it still may not be at the perfect center of the world. So this is giving me a ring, but it's not at the center. Right? So there is a little trick you can do with the array mesh to get the pivot to reset and have it go directly to the center of the world. So to do this, you just need to make sure you have the array mesh active. You need to turn on this lock position option here, and then you need to click reset. So the lock position is going to look at the position of the model off the center of the world, and when you click reset, it's going to take the pivot and now snap it to the center of the world. So you'll see a change like this, so it's just basically just resetting the array. But now, after I click this reset, I can now come down here to the rotate area. I can change my Z-axis to 360 again. And if I zoom out, you can see that now it's generated that second repeat down below, and it's centered on that middle point. So now I can change the repeat values here, and now I'm getting this array mesh generated directly around the center of the world. So that process again, let's just go here through and delete this quick. So we're just going to delete the array mesh. Actually, we'll just do this process from the start real quick. So I'm going to get a Polymesh 3D again. I'm going to switch to my clip curve brush. I'm going to make it a quick hemisphere. Now I'm going to switch to the Gizmo 3D. I'm going to move it above the world, so something like that. I'm now going to go to the tool palette, go to the array mesh tab, I'm going to turn on array mesh. I'm going to turn on lock position. I'm going to click reset. Now I'm going to go to rotate, change my Z-axis to 360, and change my repeat. And now that's going to take that shape, and it's going to use its offset from the center of the world to generate that effect. Now, since this is an array, I can now reposition that model. And as you can see, as I get closer to that center of the world, the cylinder here is going to get tighter. And as I extend out, it's going to get larger. And you can now manipulate that initial shape to change it to pretty much anything you like. You can get different designs and craziness out of that. You can apply rotational values. But now that's going to generate off the center of the world. So if you do a lot of center of the world modeling, this is extremely helpful for definitely generating different shapes and designs with the array mesh. And you can get some pretty cool options for that. But that process is what I end up, usually mostly I use the array to take objects and then manipulate them around the center of the world. So definitely is a handy thing, but it's a little bit of a hidden feature because you need to turn lock position on and then click reset, and then that will center the pivot there. So then you get, woo, make some cool stuff. Oh, the Pandora box gizmo. I try to keep it vanilla for you guys. I don't want to go too crazy. So Ken, can you elaborate on the mouth bag head sculpt stuff? Because you can definitely use the, say, Boolean features to add one through there, but you can also just do it with traditional sculpting by just starting to manipulate the mouth like inward. There's also the functionality of the vector displacement meshes that allow you to create one first, and then you can drag it out on a model, and it would generate that inner mouth cavity for you. So there's a lot of options for that. If there's anything in particular, I can probably show you that quick. So Mr. Bones here is asking, is the process for UV unwrapping in ZBrush the same after you use the Boolean? The Booleans, the mesh seem broken. So the output for the Boolean mesh should be giving you a mesh result. And the only thing that's changing there, if you had UVs on your model first, after you do make Boolean mesh, it's definitely going to remove those. But the geometry you're getting afterwards, it still should have polygroups set up based on the models you had, and then you should be able to unwrap them like you would any mesh inside of ZBrush. So we'll just run through this quick. So here I just have a capsule shape here. I'm going to turn on dynamic subdivision. And then I'm going to go to the subtool palette here. Let me turn off this floor grid. And I'm going to append in a polysphere. Wait for it. Wait for it. I'm going to take this, switch back to the gizmo. I'm just going to move it to this area here. I'm going to increase leave my divisions like that, polysphere like that. So I'm going to activate live Boolean, which is up here. This is going to allow me to preview Boolean operations inside of ZBrush. Go to my subtool palette over here. I'm going to set that sphere as subtractive and turn off my polyframes. And now I should be getting this result. So I have that sphere being subtracted from my capsule here. And just an example of this, I'm going to make sure these both have one polygroup all the way through. So I'm going to turn on my polyframes, turn off the line. And I'm going to hit Control W to give a new polygroup to the masked or unmasked portion of that mesh. And then on the sphere, I'm going to do the same thing. So now each of these tools here have their own polygroup. So let's get this a little bit different color there. There we go. So the sphere has this polygroup and the capsule has this. I'm now going to perform the Boolean operations, so make sure I have live Boolean active. Go to the subtool palette, make sure I do not have solo turned on. I'm going to go down to the Booleans here. I'm going to turn on my dynamic subdivision since I'm using it for the capsule, and then I'm going to click Make Boolean Mesh. So that's going to take these two objects here and now generate a new tool up here with the result of that Boolean process. And if I click on this, this is the result I have here. If I turn on my polyframes here, you'll see the polygrouping has stayed. So I have the polygroup for the capsule and the polygroup for the sphere. And if I hold Control and Shift and click, I can isolate these guys. And if I turn on my line function here, you'll see that this is the topology. So the topology has only changed in the areas where the Boolean intersection happened. So it's happened along the sphere here as it collided into the cylinder. So that's where you're getting these triangular areas. But all the other topologies, this is the original topology of the capsule, and this is the original topology of the sphere. So all this has stayed except for the transition areas. So now at this stage, this is just a normal model. So the Boolean process has happened and it's just giving you a mesh result. So now you should be able to use any of the unwrapping options that you're normally used to. So I can come up to the Z plugin tab here. Now I'm saying this because hopefully this works. And I'm just going to switch to polygroups here. I'm going to keep symmetry on, and now I'm just going to click unwrap. And this should now process that. And if I go down to my texture map tab here, go to create, and now do new from UV map, you can see it's giving me this option here. So this is definitely looking a little bit weird. So let's see. You may be onto something here. Maybe onto something here. And let's see here. Let's check our mesh. Mesh looks good. And let's try that one more time here. So let's keep symmetry off. Do an unwrap on that. New from UV map. So yeah, it is doing a little bit interesting things here. I'm gonna have to look into this. It shouldn't be changing, so this might be something with UV master in general. But definitely, it is just a default mesh. There shouldn't be anything that should be changing and causing any different issues to happen with unwrapping. So, but if this is a consistent thing here, that is something to look into. Interesting. All right, so Mr. Bones, 103 Bones. We will definitely look into that. I have written a note down. That is a little bit strange. It should not be doing that. I agree. So thank you. All right, so head sculpt and using Zmodeler to add a mouth bag. So this is what Ken was talking about here. So let's go and grab this option here. So I don't know what current format your head sculpt is. Do you have a low resolution version and then you have subdivisions on it? So that's also going to contribute to how you'd go by using it. Definitely, if you have lower subdivisions on it, it may be easier to freeze those lower subdivisions and then sculpt the mouth area in. So as an example, let's see what the demo head has here. I think he already has one. Yeah, he has some. So let's say your model looks like, I'm going to get rid of his mouth here. Get rid of his mouth. We'll stretch these out just a little bit. Just trying to get that topology to be a little more random there, because we do have a little bit too much for pinching purposes. So yeah, there is definitely different processes you can do for this to add a mouth bag. So the one is definitely the Zmodeler option, where if you have just row topology, you can start moving those points in. If you're only looking for sculptural data and you're only going to generate out a high resolution mesh, basically you just need to divide the area up and then you can use the move brush to pull it in. So if you're not concerned about a low resolution option, like definitely just doing something like this really quick with a dense mesh will allow you to pull that cavity in, and then you can use pinch around the outer edges of the lips to kind of get them to seal up, and then you can go and isolate that inner bag and start manipulating that way. The other option you could end up doing is, why am I not? Let's go here. Is you could start using the vector displacement meshes. So if we go to, say, the Chisel 3D brush here and select that, in here we have like a mouth option here, and this is another kind of way you can use sculptural data to kind of deform a mesh. So I can take this and then generate this across the model, and as you generate it across, this is looking excellent, by the way, you see it's going to take that mesh and kind of deform the surface around there. So you could use something like this as well and just change the intensity to kind of contribute this to start manipulating your model and get that shape carved in as well, and then you can furtherly sculpt on that. The Boolean system is definitely another way. The thing with that is, though, when you use the Boolean system, it's going to generate a mesh that's going to give you new topology. So if you need to keep that existing topology, your best practice is probably going to be do what you're doing. So adding edge loops and then moving those back, and then, you know, coming through and going that route where you're freezing the subdivisions, adding the edge loops with Zmodeler brush, moving those into position, and then, you know, sculpting around it. Because definitely, if you want to keep this geometry here, if you start using the Boolean system, it's going to change the geometry in those areas. So if you're worried about that low resolution mesh, worried about keeping those curves you already have established through your topology, you're going to want to use it more of like a addition on the lowest part of the mesh. Because I could come through and just add, say, another polysphere here, and it's going to give me this shape. I can then move this out. And so if you have a sculptural mesh and you're not concerned about the topology area, you can definitely come through and start manipulating a shape like this. And I'm going to take the demo head and just move it down below the eyes here. I'm going to turn on the start option here, so it's going to just generate a new mesh from here down using the Boolean system, and then I can set the polysphere to be subtractive, make sure I have live Boolean on, and now I can start moving that sphere into the object here, and you see now it's going to start generating this effect. If I turn off the eyes here. So this is now using the Boolean system for that. So now I can go back to the demo head. I can switch to the clay buildup brush, start sculpting, you know, mouth geometry around this transition there. So it's going to be really excellent quick sculpt as well. And I can start moving this with the move brush as well. So you could start using this process to tailor a mouth bag as well if you're just looking for kind of a sculptural mesh data out of it. And then you can modify the polysphere as well, so I can start sculpting in a negative fashion on this. Let's get the clay buildup brush here, and you see now it's going to affect just that polysphere, so you can carve the inside out of the mouth there. You can start adding random tongue shape, and if you view this in isolation mode, you're going to see that this is the result you're going to get. So you're looking at it in like a flipped version of it, so you'd want to make sure that you think about it as a reversed object. So this part here just coming through and pushing this out, or inward rather. It's going to give me that tongue, and then when I go back to subtractive mode, you can see I'm going to start getting this part popping up through here. So it's a little bit different way of kind of thinking, because you're also thinking about how you model the object or sculpt on the object in a positive or negative fashion too. So it's definitely can get a little tricky, but you could definitely use this process as well and just manipulate geometry around it to get the result you're looking for. And then after you have this done, it's looking wonderful. You just need now to convert this to a mesh. So I go to the Make Boolean Brush button here, click this. So now give me a new tool up here, and now I can append it back to my scene. And so now I have this, and this is going to now be solid. So it's going to give me a watertight version of this. And then at this stage, now you can flush out, you know, more sculpting on this, smooth those edges out, fix that tongue area, do those kind of processes. You can use inflate to come through and start inflating the transitional lines. And then you can even convert this now back to, say, a Dynamesh. So go to Geometry, Dynamesh, we'll set something, say 256, a little bit low. And now you can come through and sculpt on it. So you can definitely, yes, carve out a quick mouth bag like that with just the Boolean, and then just process it and use Dynamesh to get you a result. So that'd be one way you can do as well. But I think the way you're kind of already doing with the adding of the Zmodeler brush for the geometry. So let's go back to demo head here. And doing, say, the free subdivisions on it. Let's get out of free subdivisions quick. And now say if I want an extra row of topology through here, and switch to, say, the Zmodeler brush, add some edge loops. And this will allow you to add edge loops anywhere to get different kind of topology zones, and then get out of free subdivisions. And now those edge loops are going to be in there, so this is going to give me more resolution. So you can just keep adding rows to the mouth, and then use that process. I don't know if that helps at all, but that's probably the best way is what you're already doing. Because you could use the Booleans to do it, but it's going to change your topology, so it just depends how much topology you want to clean up. So another question from Raphael here asking, can you show a workflow to convert a Boolean mesh to a Dynamesh and keep the edges crisp? So let's see if I have an example here for you guys quick. Wait for it. Wait for it. I know I have one. Hold on. So many models. So many models. All right, so here we have a Boolean example here. This is using the live Boolean system, and this one consists of quite a few different subtools here and a bunch of different start groups. So if I turn live Boolean off, this is what it looks like originally, and then with live Boolean on, I have this kind of gun arm type shape from Armored Core. And I'm just going to process this quick, so I'm going to make Boolean option here. I'm going to turn on dynamic subdivision since a lot of these objects here are dynamic. And I'm going to click Make Boolean Mesh. And this will go through and process those Booleans. And then if that's done, I'm going to have a new tool at the top here. And it's going to look at all those start groups, and what it did with those, it's going to create a new subtool for each of those start groups. So if I turn on solo mode here, you can see these are the individual pieces. So I have this part here. I have a bunch of these little screws and bolts. I've got the front kind of barrel area. All sorts of different little elements and parts that this object consists of. So it's all these tiny little pieces, and then together it looks like this. And all these parts were processed with the Boolean. So if I turn on my polyframes here and just isolate one of these guys here, you can see the transition areas all have that triangulation where the intersections for the Boolean were happening, and then the topology is held in all the other places. So this was very handy, and you can see how long it took me to process that. It was literally seconds. So it went through all 69 of those subtools and now has outputted this version of the model for me using the Booleans. So the question is asking about taking this and, say, now turning it into a Dynamesh. So for the Dynamesh process, it's basically the same functionality that has always been inside of ZBrush. So you need to set a resolution, and the resolution needs to be high enough to support the topology you want to hold. And the Dynamesh resolution is also going to relate to the size of your mesh. So if I have this one here, just selected, this part here, and I go to the Geometry tab here, and then I go to Size, this is my current size inside of ZBrush. So the internal size inside of ZBrush of this model, its global XYZ values is 0.8. Now, things inside of ZBrush work the best when your XYZ scale is set to 2. So this is a little bit under what the optimal size is inside of ZBrush. Now, if I go to, say, the deformation palette and do a Unify, this would take this subtool and unify it to a size of 2. So that's going to give me a more consistent resolution for using Dynamesh. So size of 2 is going to allow me to get kind of the optimal resolution when using Dynamesh. Now, this isn't to say that I can't use Dynamesh with a model that has an XYZ size lower than 2 or greater than 2. It just may take a different resolution than what you're used to. So if you eyeball this here, you're like, probably like a 128. So I can come up here and try to Dynamesh this with 128, and this is the result I'm going to get. Now, if this model was set to 2 and I Dynamesh at 128, so let's unify this quick, and now Dynamesh at 128, you see I'm now going to get this result. So the XYZ size and the Dynamesh resolution are going to determine what output you're going to get from Dynamesh. So you can see as I just scaled the model up here and used the same resolution, I got a better result. So just one little thing to add some more confusion for you guys to think about when you're doing Dynamesh processes. So for this one here, I just need to Dynamesh it high enough so that it retains the edges. So if I set this to say a 512 and turn off blur and then Dynamesh, so I'm getting a little bit better. So I'm starting to get a little more of those options there. Now at this stage, you can keep trying to increase your resolution. So if I go up to 1024 in Dynamesh, and you keep just trying this to see which one's going to handle. So this model here at 1024, we're looking pretty good. You'd probably end up being a 2048 resolution is what would be required to hold the details on this Boolean mesh. Now, another option, rather than maxing out your Dynamesh resolution, is that you can first just Dynamesh the model at a resolution that's holding the silhouette. So if I come back over here and say set this back to 512 and Dynamesh again, and if I just look around this mesh here, you can see it's holding pretty much everything, right? It's not as clean as the original mesh, but it's holding all the silhouette changes. So it has all these kind of screw holes established. It's got these like areas popped out established. It's got the inner areas. So it's got enough information to support that other version. So what I can do with this is I can Dynamesh at a low resolution, divide it up, and then project the details back from the non-Dynameshed version. And this is going to give you a workflow that's not going to require you to max out Dynamesh, and it's also going to allow you to have subdivisions that you can now use to manipulate this object even further. So let's undo that there, and I'm going to go back to my subtool palette here, and I'm going to duplicate this. So I have two of them. So I have this one and this one. So I've just taken that tool and I've just created a duplication of it. Now with this one here, I'm now going to Dynamesh this at that low resolution. So say 512, turn off blur, and now Dynamesh. And now I have this version of the model here. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to divide this up with traditional subdivisions. So I'm going to go to the Geometry tab and divide this up. So I'm going to divide once and maybe twice. This is bringing me up to 1,000,000 points there. So that should be pretty good there. And now I want to now do a projection from the original mesh to this one. So I want to capture the original mesh details on this model. Now before I do this, I want to store a morph target. And so by storing a morph target, this is going to help me clean up any ray misses that may happen during the projection. So I'm going to go down to the morph area here, open up morph target. I'm going to click store morph target. And now this has just stored the vertex positions of the model in this subdivision. Now I can go back up here to my subtool palette. I'm going to turn on the eyeball icon for the original mesh. So this is the one that has all those crisp edges. I'm going to go to the projection area here, open this up. I'm going to set my distance to 0.1. And that's going to allow me to get this projection to be a little bit closer to the surface. And now I'm just going to click Project All. Now when you click Project All, it's going to look at the objects in your subtool list. And if it has an eyeball icon on, it's going to take the data on that subtool and project it to the current subtool you have selected. So I only have these two visible right now, so it's going to take this one here and project the data onto this one. So just clicking this button here is going to process that. And depending on how many millions of polygons your mesh has, this could take a little while. And now it is done. So you can see this is the result I am getting from the projection. So you can see there is some little areas here that may have missed a little bit, so I can switch to, say, the Morph brush now, and then use a small draw size, and just come through and clean those up if needed. You can also just smooth these out. But this is now a version of the mesh that has now been Dynameshed and then reprojected. Now you probably want to divide up one more time and project again, because some of these little edges through here didn't fully get the areas, but you can come through and smooth these out and reproject. But this is another way to, say, take a model, give it a low Dynamesh resolution. You can even use ZBrush instead of Dynamesh, divide it up, and then project those details back. And now, instead of having this crazy dense, high-resolution Dynamesh, I now have a model with lower subdivisions. So I can scrub these up and down. If I need to do large changes on it, I can now switch to, say, the lowest subdivision level, grab, say, a move brush, and instead of moving this million polygon Dynamesh, I can now just move this one, which is only at subdivision 1, 69,000, and then I can change my resolution slider, and now I can get these effects. So that's another way you can kind of take a Boolean mesh, make the mesh out of it, and convert to a Dynamesh, but not max out your Dynamesh version. Because the Dynamesh process in general inside of ZBrush was created to quickly generate base meshes. So thinking of how you have a ball of clay and you start pulling the clay out. You maybe want to add some clay here, add some clay there, and then you want to make sure that surface is even. And then after you have your silhouette established, you then go through and divide the model up and then use the subdivisions along with sculpting to get those intricate details. So it's basically just intended to be used as a silhouette builder, kind of establish your base forms, and then use traditional subdivisions on top of it to start getting those details. So let's say I got time for one more since we're already over time here. So let's see, we got a question here from Blands. What are you asking about? Could you use that and make a multi-mesh insert brush? So any model that has multiple subtools can be used as a multi-mesh insert brush. So if I go back to this one here, and let's say I delete the one that projected to, and I have all these different parts. So this is a subtool. This is a tool with 29 different parts. I turn them on, it's like this. And you can create any tool file that has multiple subtools. You can turn them into an insert mesh. So if I take this here and I just position it, you want to make sure it's positioned on the way you want these IMM parts to draw out. So if I position this like so or like this, just position on your canvas. Then you go to the brush palette over here. You can go to create. You can create. Now you can click create, insert multi-mesh. This will take all the subtools in the file here, and it's now going to give you a new brush out of those. So you can see now I have an insert mesh brush with 29 different parts. And if you hit M or scroll this up here, you can see all those different parts here. So now I have all these in here. So you can take any tool inside of ZBrush that has multiple subtools and convert it to a multi-insert mesh brush. So it's just looking at the subtools, and it's going to create each of those individual parts as a new item in that brush. So any brush can use that. All right, last one. So from Brad, the Zmodeler brush causes a toolbar to drop down with polysphere in it. I'm not sure what purpose that serves. So I assume you're talking about this right here, right? This is the IMM toolbar. So when you have an IMM brush selected, I'll show you the purpose of this. So let's go back to my polysphere here. Make sure we have no subdivisions on it. And let's say I pick a part from the IMM brush. We're just going to pick, say, this one here, cone 3. I'm going to draw it out. So this up here is just allowing you another option for choosing IMM parts. So instead of pressing M, you now get a visual representation of them at the top here. Now, in addition to this, if you switch to the Gizmo 3D, while you have a part unmasked on your model, and now you scroll through these, it's now going to update, right? So you can see as I'm doing this, it's replacing the unmasked part. So this allows you to add a part to your model, and then you may go, I kind of like that, but let's see what something else looks like. And instead of drawing it out again, you can just scroll through this, and you can see through the rest of the IMM parts what that's going to look like. And then after you have one of these drawn out, you can now duplicate the unmasked part by simply holding Control and clicking the Move button, Move option on the gizmo there, which will give me another item. I can now say scale this down, position it into my mesh. Now I can come back up here, and let's try another shape. And so this just gives you this functionality of being able to clone a part, change it, scale it, move it around, and then as you go up to the IMM part here, you can switch it, That's going to give you a new option, and then you can further manipulate parts of your model like that. So it's intended to be like a quick building thing for adding different parts and making different designs that you may not have thought of with IMM parts to just allow them to be combined together. Now you can disable this. I see we already have this answered in the chat there. So Seagull Crush is totally correct. To go to the Preferences tab here, there is, let me find it. I have to cheat and look. In the interface area, there's an IMM viewer here, and here you have the placement option. So you can change where this is located by changing this toggle here. So scrolling this around will place this IMM viewer on different parts of your canvas there. So you can see it's going to rotate all the way around. And then if you turn off this here, this auto show and hide, it will hide that. So if it's disabled, next time you select an IMM brush, it's not going to pop open. Now you want to make sure if you have that toggle that you store your config, and I'll make sure that that option is saved. So the next time you come through and select an IMM brush, that little IMM viewer will not pop up. All right. Yes, the Zmodeler brush can contain Nanomesh parts, which is why in order to create a Nanomesh, you take an IMM brush and you convert it to a Nanomesh. So when you switch to the Zmodeler brush, if it has internal parts, you can see it has a 1 here, so it has 1 built in. But say I go and say take the IMM model kit and now create a Nanomesh brush out of that, you see now it has 120 parts, and these are going to end up being used when you have an object, say like this one, and you hover over a poly and go into the Zmodeler poly action menu. There is a insert Nanomesh option here, and this will now take those parts. This one has 120 parts. Let me turn my viewer back on here. And if I take those parts, and now it's going to apply those as a Nanomesh on my surface. So yes, a Zmodeler brush can contain those individual parts, which kind of make it an IMM brush. Yep, Nanomesh. All right, so that is it. So if you guys, once again, if you have any questions related to ZBrush pipelines and processes, please use the hashtag AskZBrush on Twitter. I'll be back live in, not next week, but the week after. And then this week I'm hoping to get a bunch of these AskZBrush videos done, because I got a little bit of a little break this week, kind of. So I'm going to try to get a lot of these knocked out. So definitely come through and use this system and submit your questions, and I will try to answer those. Once again, if I did not answer your question, or maybe I told you to go contact support.pixologic.com, this is the support page here, so you can go to submit a ticket, and in here you can file a ticket, and this will get looked at by our support experts and hopefully get those solutions solved for you guys. So thanks for coming out. We do have, I think, someone else today. Let's see here on the calendar. Shane Olson will be on Twitch later today at 7 p.m. PST, and he'll be sculpting. So once again, Shane Olson will be on later this evening. We also don't forget about the ZBrush Summit, and there are workshops and on-site events as well. So definitely check out summit.zbrush.com. And if you're looking or would like to be a presenter on our Twitch channel, if you go to ZBrushLive.com, over here there is a Creatives Apply Here button underneath the schedule, and you can click this, and this will give you an application to fill out. We would love to have you, so definitely fill out the application, and we can fit you in on one of these empty slots here and get the ZBrush Live here on Twitch to be 24/7. So definitely check that out. Thank you all for sharing your morning with me and hanging through all the incredible areas where I need to practice some more using my Twitch skills. My Twitch skills are not strong. They're not strong. I need to work on it. So have a good day. Thanks.